Most people know one name, Rosa Parks, the woman who refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus in 1955. Her name is in every history book, every classroom, every documentary. Rosa Parks, the mother of the civil rights movement. That is what they call her. But here is what they never told you. She was not the first. 9 months before Rosa Parks made history, a 15-year-old girl did the exact same thing. Same city, same bus, same law, same refusal. But you have never heard her name, because the people who were supposed to protect her decided she was not good enough to be the face of a movement. Her name was Claudette Colvin, and this is the story they buried. I was not even looking for this story. I was researching something else entirely, when I stumbled across a name that stopped me cold. A name that should have been famous, but had been quietly, deliberately erased. I kept reading, and the more I found, the more I could not believe what I was looking at. A 15-year-old girl who did something extraordinary and was thrown away by the very people who should have lifted her up. If this is the kind of history they don't teach you, the kind they hope you never find, then make sure you subscribe to this channel, because we are just getting started. To understand what happened to Claudette Colvin, you have to understand what life was like in Montgomery, Alabama. In 1955, this was not ancient history. This was living memory. This was the American South under Jim Crow, a set of laws and customs designed to keep Black Americans separate, inferior, and silent. Black Americans could not eat at the same restaurants as white Americans, could not drink from the same water fountains, could not attend the same schools, could not sit in the same waiting rooms. Every part of daily life was divided by race, and the message was clear. You are less than. You will stay in your place, or there will be consequences. And the consequences were real. Black men and women who stepped out of line could be fired from their jobs, evicted from their homes, arrested, beaten, or worse. And on the buses of Montgomery, that system played out every single day. Black passengers had to pay their fare at the front, then walk around to the back door and re-enter. If the white section filled up, black passengers had to give up their seats, stand in the aisle, or get off entirely. No argument, no discussion, no choice. This was not just a custom, it was the law. Most people kept their heads down and said nothing, not because they were weak, but because they were surviving. So they endured. Day after day, year after year, they endured. But on the 2nd of March, 1955, a 15-year-old girl decided she had had enough. Claudette Colvin was born on the 5th of September, 1939, in Birmingham, Alabama. She grew up in a working-class black neighborhood in Montgomery, raised by her great-aunt and great-uncle, who she called her parents. She was a serious child, quiet, thoughtful, and deeply religious. At Booker T. Washington High School, she was a good student who read widely and thought deeply. In the months before her arrest, her class had been studying the United States Constitution, reading about rights, about justice, about what America was supposed to stand for, and she was looking around at her life in Montgomery and seeing how far reality was from those promises. She later said that by early 1955, she was fed up, not just frustrated, but deeply, morally fed up. She had been reading about her rights, and she was starting to believe that she actually had them. On the afternoon of the 2nd of March, 1955, Claudette Colvin boarded a city bus after school. She sat down in the middle section, the area where black passengers were allowed to sit, unless white passengers needed the seats. As the bus filled up, a white woman was left standing. The bus driver ordered Claudette and 3 other black passengers to give up their seats. The other 3 moved. Claudette did not. She sat there, quietly, firmly, her hands in her lap, and she said, "It is my constitutional right to sit here." The driver warned her again. She did not move. He stopped the bus and called the police. 2 officers arrived and ordered her to get up. She still refused. They grabbed her, dragged her from her seat, handcuffed her, and threw her into the back of a police car. She was 15 years old. She was crying and reciting the Constitution and the Lord's Prayer all the way to the jail. She was charged with misconduct, breaking the segregation law, and assault because she had scratched one of the officers when they grabbed her. Her pastor came and bailed her out, but the charges remained, and her life would never be quite the same. Word spread quickly through Montgomery's black community. Civil rights leaders took notice immediately. The local NAP had been looking for exactly this kind of case: a clear arrest, an articulate young person, a straightforward violation of segregation law. That could be taken to court and used to challenge the entire system. For a brief moment, Claudette Colvin seemed like the perfect test case. Rosa Parks herself, who was at the time working as secretary of the Montgomery NOC, met with Claudette after the arrest. She later described her as bright and intelligent, and very strong-willed. The movement was interested. But then, something changed. The civil rights movement in Montgomery was fighting a very careful battle. They were not just trying to win in court, they were trying to win in the court of public opinion. They needed a symbol who was beyond reproach. Someone whose personal life could not be picked apart, could not give their opponents ammunition. Claudette Colvin was 15, unmarried, and pregnant. The pregnancy was not yet visible, but the leaders knew, and they were afraid. E.D. Nixon, one of the most powerful figures in the Montgomery civil rights movement, later said that Claudette was not the kind of plaintiff they wanted. So quietly, without any public announcement, without any explanation to Claudette herself, the movement set her aside. They dropped her case. They moved on, and they waited for someone more suitable. Claudette Colvin was left to face her charges alone, pregnant, 15 years old, and abandoned by the very people who had shown up at her door promising to help. 9 months later, on the 1st of December, 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery city bus. She was arrested, and this time, the movement was ready. Within days, Montgomery's black community launched a bus boycott. For 381 days, black residents refused to ride the city buses. They walked, they carpooled, they sacrificed. Together, Martin Luther King Jr. emerged as the face of the boycott. Rosa Parks became a symbol of quiet dignity and resistance. The boycott worked. In November 1956, the Supreme Court ruled that bus segregation in Alabama was unconstitutional. It was a monumental victory. But here is what most people do not know. The Supreme Court ruling did not come from the boycott alone. It came from a separate federal court case, quietly moving through the courts at the same time. That case was called Browder versus Gayle, and one of the 4 plaintiffs was Claudette Colvin. The case argued directly that bus segregation violated the 14th Amendment. The 4 plaintiffs were all black women who had experienced discrimination on Montgomery's buses. Claudette Colvin was the youngest. She testified about her arrest, about being dragged off the bus in handcuffs, about the fear and the humiliation, and about her belief that what had been done to her was wrong. In June 1956, a federal district court ruled in their favor. The city of Montgomery appealed, and in November 1956, the Supreme Court upheld the ruling. It was the Browder versus Gayle decision, not the boycott itself, that legally ended bus segregation in Alabama. Claudette Colvin had helped make history for the second time. But when the celebrations happened, when the photographs were taken, when the history books were written, her name was not there. After the court case, Claudette Colvin found life in Montgomery difficult. Finding work was hard. Doors closed in front of her. Even within the black community, she felt the quiet disapproval of people who thought her personal situation had caused problems for the movement. She was not celebrated. She was not thanked. She was simply left behind. In the early 1960s, she left. She moved to New York City and found work as a nurse's aide, a job she would hold for decades. She was not famous. She was not recognized on the street. She was just a woman living quietly, carrying a story inside her that the world had decided it did not need. It was not until 2009, more than 50 years after her arrest, that her story began to reach a wider audience. Author Philip Hoos published a book called Claudette Colvin, Twice Toward Justice. It won the National Book Award for Young People's Literature. Suddenly, people were paying attention. Claudette Colvin was in her late 60s by then. She gave interviews. She spoke at schools. She was finally, after half a century, being heard. But her name never reached the level of recognition it deserved. Rosa Parks remained the symbol. Claudette Colvin remained a footnote in the story of someone else's legacy. In 2021, Claudette Colvin went to court one final time, not to fight segregation, but to have her juvenile arrest record expunged, to have the charges from that March afternoon in 1955 finally, officially, removed from her record. The judge agreed. At the age of 76, Claudette Colvin's record was cleared. 66 years after they dragged her off that bus in handcuffs, the state of Alabama finally acknowledged that what they did to her was wrong. She told reporters that she felt vindicated, that a weight had been lifted, that she could finally let it go. Here is what I want you to sit with. When we talk about history, we talk about the people who were chosen. Rosa Parks was chosen. Martin Luther King was chosen. The movement decided who would be remembered and who would be set aside. And those decisions were not always about courage or sacrifice. Sometimes they were about optics, about strategy, about who the world would find easiest to accept. Claudette Colvin was 15, pregnant, and working class. She did not fit the image the movement wanted to project. So they left her out, and history followed their lead. But history is not only made by the chosen ones, it is made by the ones who acted first, before anyone told them it was safe, before anyone decided they were suitable, before the cameras arrived, and the speeches were written, and the strategy was planned. Claudette Colvin sat down on that bus, alone, afraid, 15 years old and carrying a child, and she refused to move. She did not do it because she was perfect. She did it because it was right. She recited the Constitution and the Lord's Prayer, all the way to jail, and then she testified in the court case. That legally ended bus segregation, and then she went to New York and lived quietly for decades while the world celebrated someone else. That is a kind of strength that most of us will never be asked to have. If this story made you feel something, if you are angry that you never learned her name in school, if you are sitting there thinking, "How did I not know this?" then you are in the right place. This channel exists to find the names that history buried, the people who were set aside, the stories that were decided were not worth telling, and to make sure they are finally told. Subscribe if you have not already, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because Claudette Colvin waited 66 years for the world to acknowledge what she did. The least we can do is make sure her story is never buried again.